Mardi Winder-Adams is the go-to divorce coach for high-achieving individuals. She is dedicated to supporting people in taking control of their separation and divorce to reduce the emotional and financial costs of the process. Mardi brings over 20 years of experience when it comes to high conflict and high asset divorces. She's an ICF and BCC executive and leadership coach. She's a certified divorce transition coach and a credentialed distinguished mediator in Texas. Mardi is the host of the podcast, The D Shift, Redefining Divorce and Beyond, and also hosts Real Divorce Talks. She is the best-selling author of the book, From I Do to I'm Done, A Woman's Guide to Preparing for Divorce, and The Other Side of Divorce, Breakups That Lead to Breakthroughs. Welcome, Mardi.
Tracy, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here talking with you today.
Well, we're honored to have you here because you know so much about the divorce process. You've been through it with so many men and women. And I think it's so important to have someone like you here to talk us through some of the strategy stuff. And today we want to talk about avoiding some costly divorce mistakes that people make over and over and over. And I get it. You haven't been through divorce before if you're like most people, so you don't know what you don't know. Now, your latest book is all about preparing strategically for the divorce. Why do you think that preparation is so important?
Tracy, I think that it's like anything in life. If you don't prepare, you are more likely to fall into common mistakes, pitfalls, and issues. And in divorce, mistakes equal additional money. I don't care whether you're doing the divorce pro se on your own or whether you got the most expensive legal team you can possibly obtain. Every time there's an error, whether it's a forced error or an accidental error, you are going to end up paying more. And I think that's the challenge of going through a divorce, right? You want to reduce the financial costs, but you also want to reduce the time and the emotional toll that the process takes on you and your kids. So getting it right the first time is really the best route possible.
Well, when we talk about what it's going to cost you, it's not just legal fees, but it'll cost you in your settlement. It might cost you because your house sale is delayed by 6 months and you're covering those costs in the meantime. There's a myriad of costs that could go into this when you're not preparing, right?
Absolutely. And I always tell people, I love that what you said at the beginning. It's not what you realize that is the problem, it's what you don't realize could be the problem. Because even simple things like whether you take a retirement, whether it's a Roth IRA, a standard IRA, whether you take cash in the bank or whether you take real estate as part of the settlement, those can have not just immediate consequences, but they can have long-term tax implications and financial consequences that if you don't know what they are, it may look like a really good deal at the settlement table, but it turns out to be a nightmare the longer that you have to go post-divorce dealing with those challenges.
And believe me, your ex does not have your best interest at heart. There are many divorces where I see a spouse saying, "Oh, my husband would never screw me over. Oh, my husband is looking out for me and he says he's going to make this fair." Almost never are they really, truly making it fair. They might make it appear fair,
Right.
certainly, but you have to have people helping you look out for yourself.
Well, and divorce is an adversarial process. I mean, let's just face it. Let's cut the niceties. It's not about, oh my gosh, we're mutually parting company. Now, there are some people who go through that kind of divorce, and if you're listening to this and you're one of those people, I really respect what you have done. But those are the minority of divorce cases, and they're certainly not the ones that get to the point where both parties have lawyered up and they're looking at litigation. Those are turning into that 15 to 30% of those higher conflict divorces where even if you started out with the intentions to be fair to each other at the beginning, by the time you are dealing with ongoing challenges, you're getting more and more adversarial the longer the process drags on.
Well, let's talk about some of the things that you recommend doing to prepare strategically for the divorce and how that helps you avoid some of these mistakes that people tend to make in divorce.
Yeah, so thank you. And this is I think one of the hot topics, because if you can do these things early, like I said, you can avoid some of these costs, emotional, financial, and long-term costs. So the first thing I always recommend is don't necessarily look at hiring an attorney as your first professional on your divorce team. And I really do believe for most people, if you have any kind of assets, any kind of retirement, any kind of concerns about your children and your kids' welfare and financial ability to go to college and all that stuff, really working with a certified divorce financial analyst or another certified divorce financial professional is really helpful, because if you know what your money is, when you go to your attorney, you can talk more knowledgeably about how you want the settlement to look. And if you have all the experts in place and you've consulted with them, you feel really empowered when you go to your attorney and you don't feel like you're just a bystander to your divorce. And that way you make sure that your voice is heard because you know what you need and you want out of the settlement, as opposed to just like, I just take whatever they give me. I think the days of that for women going through divorce is over, or it should be over, because, like you say, people are not always playing fair in these cases.
It should be over, but unfortunately, I see all too often women taking what they can get versus standing their ground and saying, "No, the law says I get X, Y, and Z, and that's what I should walk away from this marriage with."
Right. And unfortunately, when you don't have that knowledge, you are a money person, so you have that knowledge. Most women, myself included, I'm not a financial expert. That's why I tell my clients the first thing you need to do is talk to somebody who knows about the money and can take a look at it. Because as you know, once you settle the money, you can't, typically, there's no way to modify those type of settlements. You can modify child support and co-parenting plans, you can work on that. But the money stuff, typically, unless there's some extreme situation, whatever you settle for, whether it's good for you or bad for you, you're going to be stuck with. So knowing that in advance really helps.
So it sounds like you're saying gathering information, especially on the financial stuff, before you run to a divorce attorney is probably going to serve you well. And I'm wondering, do you recommend getting those financial ducks in a row before you even talk about divorce with your soon-to-be ex?
Yes, and you know I do because I know that's one of your key points for your clients as well. Because if there is any funny business going on with the money, um, gathering that information, whether it's, just even noting where mail is coming from, if there's mails from investors, firms, or brokerages or banks coming for your spouse, just making note of those addresses, getting anything you can, downloading statements, doing all that kind of stuff online, doing a little bit of looking around, maybe in browser histories. What have people been going to and looking at? I think that is so important, because once you talk about divorce, if somebody, like I said, is doing funny business with the money or hiding funds, or is going to siphon money out of accounts, they're going to do it once they hear that word divorce. So you want to make sure you understand what the playing field is before you trigger that tripwire, if there is going to be one.
Well, and make no mistake, if things have been going poorly in the marriage, you should assume that your spouse has been doing some planning and has been strategizing about the money, potentially hiding it, maybe not, but I'll tell you what, I see it in more divorces than I would like to, that there is hidden money. Just always assume that they're strategizing and they're anticipating a divorce, even if you haven't had that discussion.
Right. And I think that money is one of those things that people are on high alert for
Yes.
during the divorce. And so, whether you're the moneyed spouse or whether you're the spouse that has a lower or no income, there's always that tendency when you hear that the other person is leaving to kind of just grab everything you can. It's kind of like a fire sale. Everybody just starts grabbing whatever they can. And that can include things like, I work with women and sometimes men who don't know that they are not a cosigner on an account or a credit card. They just assume that it's in joint name, and it's not. And they find themselves completely locked out of those accounts. And sometimes those are the accounts that are making the payments on the mortgage or the insurance, or, the car payment, whatever it may be. So having all that information, having all that knowledge, and knowing what you need to do to protect yourself if the spouse does shut off those accounts is absolutely critical.
Well, I think it's important to, even if you know for sure your name is on a particular bank account, I always tell my clients to get copies of those statements, download them right away, as you're preparing for the divorce, because your name could get taken off the account. You're on the account today, but you could try to log in tomorrow and your spouse may have gone to the bank and removed you from that account. You just never know.
Right. Yes, and you also don't know about the credit card stuff. I always encourage my clients to take actual information as to what was the balance on the card, what charges were on the card up to the current statement, because sometimes spouses, as we all know, go on revenge spending things where they will just run up credit cards and buy things. Now, eventually that's going to sort itself out, but you want to protect yourself as the person who is still potentially responsible for those debts that that person is running up. So any of that information that you can gather and provide to your financial person and then eventually to your attorney is just going to help sort through the financial stuff in the long run.
Okay, let's say we've done this preparation, we've got some strategy, we're ready to go, and we're going to talk to our soon to be ex about divorce. Do you have recommendations for how to have that conversation?
I do. And I think, again, this is something that planning makes all the difference. So I think it is important to sit down, have some space or time for yourself, and just think about when similar issues have been presented to your spouse, obviously not divorce, but maybe when there's been a challenge or a disagreement in your relationship, what has been their response? How have they been about accepting information that they may not want to hear? Because I think the last thing you want to do is go into this and have that initial conversation about the divorce become incredibly adversarial. That just sets the tone for everything. And unfortunately, a lot of times people tolerate behavior, and then all of a sudden there's a breaking point, and quite often it's already when things are heated or when there's some kind of disagreement, and then somebody blurts out, "That's it, I've had it, I want a divorce." Well, if you're the person receiving that information, if you are naturally a high conflict person or very defensive or very adversarial in the way you respond, you can see how that could really quickly escalate that situation. So I try to encourage people, think about it, even if it means writing out what you want to say. And then if you have a trusted friend, if you have a coach or if you have somebody that you can share that information with, try actually having that conversation and asking the other person to role play. How would you respond? And then get comfortable with dealing with what you think your partner may say about that. And the more prepared you can be, right down to planning, when are you going to do it? Where are you going to do it? And who needs to know if you were doing this? And I always suggest that you have somebody know about these conversations in case the situation gets heated and you need a place to go or you need somebody to check in on you and make sure everything is okay. And I never wish for any of this to ever have to come to a strategy where you have to have a plan to get out safely. But I think it's only fair if there has been a history of any kind of violence, physical or emotional abuse in the relationship, to have a safety plan in place. And that may be not doing this conversation in your home, it may be doing it somewhere else, or even going to a therapist's office to have that conversation if you're concerned about how the partner may act.
I love the idea of planning what you're going to say and then practicing it out loud. It seems to me that if you don't do this, the costly part of it is, you know, an elevated degree of acrimony and just a lot of conflict and drama, more so than if you plan it. Correct?
Well, yeah, and it can turn into the blame game, right? I say I want a divorce because you never listen to me, and then you say, "Well, you don't ever pay attention to what I say," and then we get into that same old argument that we've had multiple times. So when we strategize and plan, we can use those I messages. I don't feel heard in this relationship. I feel the best option for me is to leave. There's no blame there. There's no allegations of what you've done wrong. And just having that confidence going into these, Sometimes I've had women that have actually, and mostly women, but I suppose it could be men as well, that have said to their partner, I want a divorce multiple times in the past, and nothing has ever come out of it. So it can be hard to get your partner to understand that this time you really are leaving or you want them to leave. And that becomes the next question. Once you say those words, what happens? Do you both stay in the house? Does one go? Does one stay? And that becomes a whole other ball of wax. And that's where you may want to have, you need to know legally what happens if you choose to leave the house. Is there any repercussions for you? I mean, it depends on what the situation. If you leave the house, if you are paying part of the mortgage, you're still going to be responsible for paying that mortgage. You can't just stop paying the mortgage because you've separated and left the house. So these kind of things are all, you need to have a good understanding of what they are before you get into this conversation.
And everyone talks about having a divorce team and how important it is. And I know that most people who are new to the divorce process hear team, they hear expensive, but I want to hear your thoughts on why it's so important to have that divorce team, why a divorce coach might be so important to help you come up with these words, come up with thinking about the strategies, thinking about the possibilities for who's going to live where, etc.
It's you know, I really thank you for this question. I think it's really up to you whether or not you feel that you need that support. Not everybody needs a divorce coach. I'm going to be the first one to say that. If you feel that you and your partner are uh, moving towards the idea that you need to separate, or the relationship is no longer sustainable, if you and your partner have handled big challenges without any kind of uh, anger or hostility towards each other, if you feel that you are very well supported, you have a great network of people that are around you that you can trust and rely on, you probably don't need a divorce coach. But that's not the majority of people going through a divorce. A lot of times, I know people are very embarrassed, they are very frustrated, they are angry, and they don't really want to talk to everybody about the divorce because it's a deeply private thing. So, having a divorce coach and a divorce team can be a great way to explore your options, to understand. I always tell people in divorce, you are going to make the most number of decisions in the smallest amount of time you have ever had to make. And they always tell you if a spouse passes away, don't make any decisions for at least a year. Right? That's the standard response. Don't make big decisions if you're in a phase of transition. Divorce is completely opposite to that. You're gonna have to make a whole bunch of decisions in a very short period of time, sometimes months. And so, having somebody that you can bounce ideas off, somebody that understands the process and can say, okay, this is what we need to do to get your ducks in a row, to go to the attorney, so that you're using your attorney for legal purposes as opposed to being a therapist or a coach, or trying to deal with unrelated legal issues with your attorney. In that way, a divorce coach, I think, can save you money. And I have had clients who've told me working with a divorce coach has dropped their legal bills by up to $1,500 to $2,000 a month.
Wow.
So that is incredible. If you're looking at paying somebody and actually being able to drop your legal bills, because again, you're not spending your time talking to your attorney about non-legal issues. And the other thing I was going to say, Tracy, about the having a team, a lot of people on the team will do a free consultation. If you have a realtor, if you have even a financial analyst, a lot of times they will take a look at your stuff, give you a brief overview or a good idea of where you need to go, and they're not going to charge anything. Until you actually start using their services. And again, depending on what your financial situation is, that may be somebody you need on the team, or it may just be a consultant you need to check in with. So a team doesn't necessarily involve a whole bunch of paid professionals.
Well, I definitely agree that people tend to rely on their divorce attorney for too much in terms of all the issues that may go on in the divorce. Your attorney is the legal expert and should be advising you on the law. They are generally the most expensive person you will hire in your divorce, which is why it doesn't make sense to rely on them for all of the support you might need on the financial issues, or all the support you might need with mental health, or the support you might need just with divorce process and strategy. That's where these other folks can come in. And I think there can be a huge return on the investment in these team members, right?
I think yes, I absolutely I believe that. I really do. And again, it's individual for everyone. If you don't own property, you don't need a realtor, you don't need a broker, you don't or a mortgage broker. There's a lot of things that you may not need. If you're going to assume the home though, here's a great one that I've seen happen more than once where the attorney has talked to the client has said, "Yes, I want to have the family home." So the attorney has negotiated that, or the mediated settlement has included the family home. And then the spouse realizes that they don't qualify for the mortgage because the mortgage company is not going to count the spousal support as income. So they no longer meet the qualifications to hold the mortgage. So now they're stuck with a home that they can't finance. So not again, that's a costly mistake that a simple consultation with a certified divorce lender or a certified divorce realtor would have kind of clicked that question into place, and that client would have had that answer ahead of time. So your team can save you money in the long run.
I will tell you that issues with the family home is one of the two most costly mistakes that I see women making in divorce. They are either taking on a home that they truly can't afford to keep, or they're agreeing to take on the home. And then, like you said, they can't get the mortgage refinanced or something like that, and they end up with a problem. The other huge costly mistake that I see related to the finances is giving up retirement funds. Women are very quick to give up retirement funds. And I know this interview is about you and the costly mistakes you see, but I am betting you see this same one with the retirement, right?
I do, and I think that's where that certified divorce financial analyst or somebody like yourself that has the ability to understand what that long-term tax implication is, because you're right, and it depends whether it's pre-tax or post-tax retirement plan, all that kind of stuff, because also that retirement plan, until you collect it, is probably earning the highest interest and income that you are going to find across most asset classes. So if you give up that retirement, it's like you give them a big gift with a bow on the top. You give your partner that and say, "Yeah, take it." And the other thing that I've seen is people not understanding about the need for a quadro to be put in place with that retirement plan, which is basically ensuring that the funds actually get transferred to you through the management of that fund. So these kind of things are all issues that people miss, and their attorney is not necessarily going to be able to advise them on it because most attorneys are not experts on taxes, financial issues, or whether or not you can qualify for these type of things like mortgages.
Okay, I've got two more costly types of mistakes that I want to talk about with you. And one of them relates to hiring the right attorney. What do you have to say about that one?
There are all kinds of attorneys. And as a person going through a divorce, you need to hire an attorney that fits for how you want your divorce to unfold. I've seen people who have made the mistake of hiring the bulldog attorney or the super aggressive attorney. And maybe that's required because of the type of person that you're divorcing. If they are a high conflict person, you may need a more aggressive attorney. But you need to understand a more aggressive attorney means a lot more filing, a lot more motions, a lot less negotiation and opportunities for collaboration, which in turn tends to equal longer time to get your divorce done and higher divorce costs. So I think that people have to understand that. The other thing is you may not want to hire an attorney that does all kinds of legal issues and doesn't specialize in family law because again, they may be a great person, they may be a fantastic attorney, but if they're also handling accident cases and criminal defense cases and, intellectual property cases, how much time and effort do they have to understand the subtleties of the family code in your area, and how much time and experience do they actually have in dealing with divorces like you're going through?
Okay, and then finally, you've got some advice regarding well-meaning friends and family members who are going to give you all sorts of advice about your divorce and tell you what their divorce was like and things like that, right?
Yes, yes, and friends and family wanna help, and, they are gonna come at you, and they're gonna share all their experience. Great Aunt Millie that got divorced in 1960 has lifelong permanent spousal support, and don't she'll tell you, "Don't worry, you're gonna be cared for, he's gonna have to pay." These things are no longer true. Most people are not going to qualify for any kind of permanent spousal support unless there's a health or some other kind of mitigating factor in that. But it is important to avoid the well wishes of the well intended information of your friends. Um, just a quick share. I had, and I talk about this in my book, but I had a client who actually was told by her family her spouse was supposed to come and pick up his things from the family home on a certain day, and he did not show up. So she called her family, and they said, "Oh, well, if he didn't come and pick them up today, you have the right to do with them what you want." So her choice was to destroy them. She destroyed the guy's suits, custom-made suits, custom-made shoes, blah, 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 and he came to pick them up the next day. They were all gone from the house, and she was like, "Well, too bad you didn't come and pick them up." Well, he went to court, and she ended up paying him $35,000 to replace his clothing items. So, do
Ouch.
not listen to your friends and family about things. If it sounds too good to be true, talk to your attorney and check it. I mean, Google can be your friend. I don't advise getting legal advice off of Chat GPT or Google or anything, but if you're questioning something, look at a law firm in your area, see if they answer the question, and then at least that gives you some kind of general guideline before you do any dramatic actions, if it's a weekend or something, before you talk to your attorney. But before you make any decisions, talk to your legal team.
Gosh, one of the things that I see with women so often is an issue comes up over the weekend. They don't want to wait until Monday or Tuesday to talk to their attorney. I've got to do something now. And they rush into doing something that really isn't proper. And I got to say, a couple of days in your divorce isn't going to make any difference unless it is dealing with this personal safety of you or your children.
Yes.
Most of the issues can wait a couple of days till your attorney's available. Marty, tell us about your latest book.
Well, the book is called From I Do to I'm Done, A Woman's Guide to Preparing for Divorce. And it really is, it outlines a lot of the things that we talked about in our conversation, and also how to prepare yourself for the emotional stuff that comes up in divorce. Um, and how to know whether at the very beginning, one of the things I talk about is divorce really the right decision? And I think that's so critical because unfortunately, I see people who get into the divorce process and then end up going, "Oh, maybe we should have worked on this." Once you put up that retainer and once you've hired these professionals, you're not going to get the money back. So just be aware that you need to know for sure this is the right thing to do. And then the book just walks you through a lot of the things we talked about: hiring the team, making decisions, getting ready to negotiate, having those conversations. And I also do quite a bit of work on how to prepare for mediation, what you need to know before you go in there.
Well, I have read the book and I can vouch for you, and I can say that the book is fantastic. It is a wonderful roadmap for getting prepared and going through the divorce process. So I will link to the book in the show notes, as well as a link to your website, Divorce Coach for Women. Marty, thank you so much for being here.
Tracy, thank you. I really enjoyed this conversation.